Good morning, and thanks a lot. So I guess this is what a room looks like when you take the women's group away from the diversity group. So I think we have a fabulous group here who is fully committed to diversity and understands the need to be so comprehensive. And it was so nice when I was asked to open this conference, and I was thinking like, okay, what can I do to tell you about the future of D&I? And I was thinking like, okay, I could do an analysis of all those things that worked and where we are and where we should be going with this. And then I thought, no. I'll just present you a very philosophical question and show you the relevance of that question for diversity from 3 different angles in order to hopefully inspire you for the rest of the day and see what you want to do with this. And I know that the speakers following will take the similar ideas and make it more concrete, so we'll kind of build the day with this. And the question that I have prepared for you is no more, no less than, who are we? Who are we? And I want to discuss this from 3 levels. Who are we as societies, and who are we as organizations? Who are we as leaders? And what does it mean? What do the answers mean for diversity and inclusion going forward? So the question, who are we as societies and national identities, as collective identities, became very important in the last couple of years when nationalism and many strange forms of dynamics started to occur around the world. And I have to admit, I have no idea if any of that happened in India. But we know a few very important companies around the world where this did happen and had some very strange effects, to say the least. So we are sometimes wondering where did that all come from and why did it happen? And the origin of this dynamic is actually dates back 25 years, when started what we call then the Third Industrial Revolution, which was spurred by 2 effects. One, globalization, and the other one, virtualization. And I'll discuss quickly what that means for D&I. If we look at globalization, what did it do? The fall of the Iron Curtain led to an increase in mobility and migration across the world. So for many people, what happened is that wherever they lived, their emotional realities really changed a lot. And they were kind of sometimes baffled and sometimes confused. And many came into some identity crisis of who are we as national identities, and how do we cope with this change? And eventually nationalism and some of those kind of protective mindsets kind of prevailed and led people to support them, because for them it was a solution to some of the problems that they encountered as a result of globalization. And some of the unfortunate effects we have seen. And even some of the gender identities that came back stronger, like men and women in more traditional ways, have also been an effect of some of that globalization questions that started to be in people's heads. And the other effect, or the other dynamic that we saw that led to a similar effect, was virtualization. And why is that? Because now people are living more and more in virtualized world. They are living online. And for human beings, this has created a real desire and a wish to be in direct contact with people or to be outside in nature. So what we see a lot is an increase again of activities of people being outside. I don't know if you have realized in wherever you live in the world that people are now looking to do more out in nature. I mean, the reoccurring of snowboarding and trekking and free riding and those things, or even in big cities where young people gather outside. For me, it's not a surprise, because when a lot of your life happens online, that you are looking for that. Another effect of that online life is that people are looking to be individual, because what they see online, it can be like, it's anything. So they themselves are looking for individuality, to shape their personal identity as part of this big gray and random thing of the internet. And this individuality can be seen from things like young fashion designers and young musicians. they don't want to be part of any trend. Have you ever heard interviews recently, and when a reporter asks them like, oh, but your music or your fashion is a bit of that type, and they will always, almost always say something like, oh no, I don't want to be associated with any of those boxes. So they have that wish to be considered and feel as an individual. But at the same time, one of the big deficits is belonging. So people at the same time want to belong to tribes or to peer groups, so they are looking for where to belong. And you won't believe it, but again, traditional norms have come back in the very young generation. Not so much the millennials, but the following. We've seen surveys where they are actually now quoting a lot like traditional family, traditional gender roles, again, as some of the solutions where this is happening. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that nationalism and that some of those very strong, impactful trends. And have you ever asked yourselves why this was able to happen in the past couple of years? And again, I think we find one reason for this to happen now in the internet. Because the internet has provided a platform where opinion is so easily confused with facts. And people have gotten used to say like, oh, I have the same right to say my opinion there just as anybody else. But that also blurs if it's a fact-based thing of a scientist or an expert, or if it's just something that people believe. Yeah? So this has been the base for the post-factual. We call it post-factual, not post-truth. Depending on where you live, you may have heard post-truth. We call it post-factual because I think it's more accurate to say, to point to the lack of facts in that discussions, because truth can be so many different things. And so in that environment, it was able for, there was a possibility for mostly political ideologists. I know it's a strong word, but I'm very clear on that. For political ideologists to establish myths, to generalize, and to repeat them. And the internet gives that opportunity for them. And I think many of you remember the experiments of Jane Elliott, of Blue-Eyed, Brown-Eyed, and how she was able to show in a very strong way how those three things, creating myths, generalizing, and also then repeating, can lead to a complete turning of the picture and of the perception. And this is what was happening. And this has really led to a dynamic that at the end was increased by the filter bubble. It was multiplied by the filter bubble and also by selective media attention. Because today, media is not only looking to deliver good journalism, but also looking to get users and readers and clicks. So they will cover a lot of things that may be more sensationalist. And that has led, at the end, to that situation that we now face at the moment. And the only thing that I'm glad about is that if we look back historically, we can see that all of those monocultural systems have eventually failed. Either they were economically not successful or they were overthrown by the people. But so historically that was the case, so I have some good feelings, but at the moment we have an issue. What does it mean to D&I? We have to face the situation where many of the collective identities that we deal with as D&I people, they are confused, they are fragile, and they are tempted by these trends that are offered. So we have to help, again, our audiences to start a reflection process of who they are, so that everybody can self-identify positively as someone living in a certain place. And we know from research that when people feel good about themselves, they are much less likely to hate other people, So that was a very old approach of D&I, to make people rediscover their identities. And with those strong identities, be able to embrace people who are different. And we have to be stronger and better in letting them know that their individuality is part of the diversity that we talk about, and that the inclusion that we offer will give them the belonging that they look for. I think this has to be really one of our missions. So in short, we have to help people to start from themselves, start by themselves, and start with whatever they have as a person. Yeah. So this is really my first little assessment about who are we as identities, as collective identities. And if we ask ourselves who it is who could do that work, it's the organizations that we work for. So it is really companies and other large organizations that can do this. Now, who are those organizations? Some of them have had diversity as an explicit part of who they think they are or who they want to be. But in the past years, we've seen a big trend in aiming organizations at embedding D&I in everything they do. And it sounds so great. If we embed it in everything we do, it will be everywhere. And everybody will benefit from diversity. But to be completely honest, when I look at what has happened, this has led to an invisibility of diversity. It has led to a situation where diversity became everybody's responsibility and eventually was no one's. And I think we have to stop this. We have to make sure that D&I becomes something explicit and something very concrete again. And that's a paradigm shift that I see coming. And we have to make it concrete and to make it relevant to the business is one of the tasks that we have that I will talk about in a second. And to make it tangible, the good thing is that this wave of unconscious bias things that has been going on for a couple of years, that's a big opportunity to make diversity tangible. Because if you look at ways to mitigate unconscious bias, that's where it becomes very concrete. And that's part of the work that we do with our leaders, is to help them understand the practicalities around that. And that's where you nail it down and where you make it strong again. So in order to think big and to bring back that explicit element of diversity, I think it's clear that we need to get away with this routine and sometimes fatigue that we now see in organizations. And where did that come from? 20 years of diversity practice has delivered a lot of good practices, and I love most of them. But it has also led to the situation where many of the organizations, they have annual diversity days, and then there is International Women's Day, and then there is Gay Pride, and there is the International Week, National Day of Intercultural Dialogue. And people go like, okay, another one, here we go again. So what do we do this year? In addition, we have seen political pressure coming in. We have seen introduction of quota. So people start now counting again and reporting and counting and reporting. And what was the process? What was the progress? 1% or 1.5? Oh, wow, 1.5. And we go like, oh, okay, routine fatigue. And we need to overcome this. We need to think big again in diversity. And I would say we need to bring back the change in D&I. This is really what I think what our mission should be soon. And how do we do this? We can only do this by allowing ourselves to look at the deeper rooted issues that we have overlooked for a couple of years. And in the US, as far as I know, they often didn't look at them, because if you allow people to talk about structural, systematic bias, you are like, ooh, class action, you know. And in Europe, they don't want it, because they have created so many platforms that will just go around saying like, oh, look at the great things we do in D&I, and we make progress, and everything is fine. And for all the small things, we have fixes and programs. And I think so. This is not how you make diversity big and strong again. Instead, I think we need to shift back the focus from legal and ethical considerations back to a very clear and strong business case. And I could talk for 1 hour about the business case analysis that we've done over 12 years, but I won't. It's all online, as Nina said in the beginning, so we can postpone that. Instead, for today, I just want to say, if we continue to do programs where we say like, oh, we have to have some legal stuff for women who can't make it for whatever reasons, for minorities, and we have to be part of the protection system. At the same time, we implicitly send them subtle message that there is a deficit that needs to be kind of bolstered up, and we shouldn't do that. I have created some 10 years ago what I called propelling potential principle, or today I'm shifting it to the propelling performance paradigm, to make sure that people understand, and the managers that we work with understand, that this is really about potential and performance and bringing out the best. And this is the only message we should be sending. And in order to do this, I think we need to be a bit more self-critical and unlearn some of the things that we thought were so good and working well over so many years. And this is tough, but we are living in a disruptive world where things are changing a lot. And so we need to do it for ourselves as well. And make clear that D&I is something that a company pursues out of its own interest. And this is why also I think companies need to be much stronger in going out there and telling the world that some of the things that are happening politically at the moment are not okay for them. And I applaud some of the big corporations that have used their brand names to do this, but I think we need 500 more to do something similar. Yeah? So this is, I think, where we need to go. And so this was about the companies and about the societies. Third short chapter, it's obviously about us. It's about us. Who are we as CDOs, as heads of diversity, as thought leaders in diversity? Who are we in all of this, and what is our role? That's the last piece that I want to leave you with for today. Let's start from this thing, like, what is it that we ask from managers, from executives when we work with them? What's the first thing we tell them? You have to role model diversity. You have to walk the talk. You have to walk the walk, and all of those things. And we are really good at that, aren't we? We know how to tell them. Are we equally good in doing it for ourselves? What about ourselves? Are we walking the talk? And I can only observe it from the outside, but when I see how some of the D&I managers, especially those who came in maybe over the past 10 years, who often didn't have necessarily D&I education, qualification, etc., I see a lot of the things like, what do? Oh, I'll just call up a friend. I just call up somebody who I've seen at a conference, and I trust them, and I will listen to what they say. I have not seen a lot of research going on. I haven't seen many D&I people doing their homework in the necessary depth and breadth at the same time. So I'm not sure if they are really walking the walk. And if I look at discussions that are going on at some of the conferences, I see a lot of people who know each other, and they meet and they present to each other, and they go like, oh, this was fantastic. And then you look at the next presentation and you're like, it's actually very similar. So there is no surprise that everybody thinks it's fantastic. So I think it's a bit of what I call a network bubble. Yeah. So you have seen the filter, and everybody knows the dynamic of a filter bubble. And I think in D&I we have a network bubble, and we need to break out from that. We need to be more open and more actively looking for things that challenge what we think and that we are planning to do in order to role model some of the diversity. And it's similar for the question of standards and ethics, because many diversity people, they are holding up the ethical flag a lot, and they are like, and we need to be very careful about all of the things and how we do those things. Now, I can only report from some of the experiences I've had as a consultant. And I've seen so many projects where people openly tell me, oh, you know what, Michael, we're looking somebody who just fits our needs or fits our company. And then I keep on thinking, like, is that the way they select their leaders? Is that the way they select their leaders, by just looking for somebody who fits in? And I go like, no, I mean, you can't do that. If you are diversity, you have to have a list of qualifications. You have to go out and select and be transparent about it. And that's just one out of many examples where I think D&I people have to hold themselves to the highest possible standards before they go out and tell others. And many things have happened where I don't see that happening. So if we just reflect on meritocracy or nepotism and ask ourselves, does that happen in diversity? And I have to say, unfortunately, it does happen, and I think it cannot happen if we take our job seriously. So we need to be more refocusing on what I would call professionalism and what we call professionalism when we talk to people and tell them how D&I can make things more professional. So how would professionalism look like in diversity? I think one of the things we have analyzed now, also with this nationalism thing going on, I think we need to be clear that we have not managed well enough to create emotional identification for people with diversity, with the topic of diversity, with the ideas of diversity, and we have not been good enough to show them the personal benefits they have from it. As we have not been able to sell the personal benefits for everybody about globalization, about European integration, many of those things were just not sold effectively, and D&I wasn't either. Otherwise, I think we would have seen a much stronger buy-in beyond programs and initiatives. I think some of you are long enough in the business to remember this wave in the beginning when we said, like, diversity shouldn't be only about differences, it should also be about similarities. And everybody was going, yeah, that's great, we like it, it will help people identify. Did we do it? We said it, but I don't think we did it, because we still kept on running women's development programs, LGBT caucus groups who we sponsored, but they did their thing. We had all of the other caucus groups in the States, and then we had all of the other minority initiatives in Europe, including for disabled, and then we started about 40 or 50 plus, and we started about millennials. But it's always this boxed thing. So I think we never really made it to understand what similarities could mean to a diversity concept. And what we have started to do is we have started to work on diversity as a mainstream majority concept and develop it from there and understand what does it mean for a whole organization and bring it back to the individual step by step. And that changes the dynamics. And this is, I think, we need. We need to reframe it and make sure that diversity becomes something that is from the beginning a concept for everyone, and not just as we go along the way. And how do we do this in practical terms? In practical terms, I think we need to redefine our audiences and be much clearer that our audiences are not only the people who are more advanced in their thinking of diversity and some who are a bit more behind, because that's our thinking sometimes. I think we need to be clear that it's everybody from the beginning, and we need different paradigms to work with those very segmented audiences. And if you think how we talked about diversity and inclusion over the past 10 years, in the beginning there was diversity and valuing diversity, and we said, okay, there are two paradigms. Then inclusion came, and I heard so many people say things like, oh, do you still do diversity? We have moved on to inclusion, and that's much better. And I thought, but why? I mean, one is nothing without the other, so why would you shift the priority? Then unconscious bias came in, and everybody thought, this is the silver bullet. We'll just take all our managers through some of those tests, and they will go, wow, and the next day they charge changing their behavior. And surprise, they don't. And research tells us why. Research tells us that if you put people through those tests too early, before they even understand the context of it, they will actually strengthen their bias afterwards in some of the behavior. So we have therefore created a bit more like multi-step processes where we slowly introduce a topic, make them understand it, eventually take them through a test once they want it, but not as an icebreaker, certainly not. So, but anyway, unconscious bias was kind of like in making away with many of the D&I stuff that we had, and I think it was wrong. Now we have inclusive leadership, and it's another great thing, but again, it shouldn't allow us to ignore the other paradigms. And now nudging is coming up, and everybody's going to oh, nudging, it's so cool, and it will change everything. And no, it doesn't. It only helps if you apply it synchronized with all the other paradigms before. And I think not enough people are aware of this. And that's partly so because many of the executives say, give me the 3 things we should do. And I say, okay, I can tell you 3 things, but I'm not sure that 3 things will be enough to cover the agenda. And I know the following speakers will talk a bit more about that. So paradigms, we need to apply those different paradigms together in an intelligent way, synchronized. And we need different formats for that. I mean, we've had a mix of events and workshops and training and some e-learning, but I've learned that if you combine them in a very intelligent way, it can have a big different impact than what we did before. So we need to be better in creating roadmaps that are actually orchestrating learning journeys for organizations and people, and also do things like what we did now for Johnson & Johnson, and I know they are speaking later today, and it was fabulous to work with them across Germany on dialogue sessions with shop floor employees. And I know that not many companies have done it, and we have created formats, open formats, to speak with large groups of people and then take results from that and go back to management. And this is completely changing the way and the dynamics that I think we can apply in diversity. So new and different formats, it's something that we really need to think about in order to address many of the things that I've mentioned before. And there is only one way that I thought I could possibly summarize what I have said today as an opening. I know I have not given you any answer about who we are as societies, as organizations, or as individuals, and I didn't want to. I wanted you to start thinking. And I think the only answer I have for you is, I think we can fairly have an estimate of who we should be. And I take a lot of pride in quoting probably the most famous person from India, and I have changed his quote slightly for us here in the room. And I think for today we should be clear that we have to be the D&I we want to see in others. So let's have a great inspired day. Thank you.
Of our appreciation for his great presentation today and inspiring us to be the D&I we want to be.
We want to see in
we
others.
Want to see.
In others.
Be
yeah.
what we want to see and make sure that we exemplify it in our space. So Michael, please accept this on behalf of the Congress.
Oh, this is perfect. Nice.